Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to appear, chairs and committee members. My name is Christopher Lyon. I'm Canadian and a family witness to MAID, academic staff at the University of York, and a visiting fellow at the Centre for Death and Society at the University of Bath. Since my father's death, I've researched and published on MAID. I speak as an individual. My dad, John Lyon, lost his life to a MAID provider in Victoria, BC in July 2021, 1 week after he moved into an assisted living apartment. With a low income, he was very anxious about how much assisted living would cost. The day he moved in was the first day of the record-setting but transient heat dome event that hit BC. 5 days later, potentially affected by the extreme heat wave, he fell in his new apartment. On day 7, as the heat dome broke, my dad received a lethal injection. When he found out about MAID, he told me a doctor told him he should have it. He was approved for Track 2 MAID for rheumatoid arthritis, frailty, recent falls, chronic pain, and conditions he'd often coped with. Halfway through the mandatory 90-day assessment period safeguard for Track 2, his providers labeled him Track 1, foreseeable natural death, and 3 days before he was killed. His medical certification of death indicates this track change was for early sepsis NYD. NYD is medical shorthand for not yet diagnosed. But the criminal code for both tracks first requires a person to have a grievous and irremediable medical condition, stating they must have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability. Track shifts like this won't be easy to see in the data Health Canada uses. When he first applied, I sent the local MAID coordinator a family document of collateral information detailing his history of mental health issues, including bouts of strong suicidal ideation during life transitions, like moving home. The heat crisis, combined with the move to assisted living, was absolutely in keeping with when he would struggle with his mental health the most. A few months before he died, my family arranged a call with the suicide prevention hotline, and he seemed to back away from this ideation, which was a recurrent pattern for him. The day he was killed was also the birthday of a family member who was present. I cannot begin to describe the horror. Dad's provider permitted him to drink wine both the evening before and day of his death. At the same time, he was prescribed prednisone, zopiclone, trazodone, and hydromorphone, all of which have severe psychotropic capacity-impairing effects and which can mimic early sepsis markers and mental disorders. He had trouble remembering when or if he scheduled his death or even if he had been assessed. Get me out of here was the flimsy assent interpreted as his final consent. I pressed for a last-minute psychiatric assessment and was told the psychiatrist would just agree with the provider. They were right. The assessment was full of errors. It denied suicidality, minimized his history of depression, denied he was a smoker, and claimed he'd been living in his assisted living flat for a month, not 4 or 5 days. His provider told me he'd probably just kill himself anyway, and that she knew she was good at MAID because she'd never lost sleep over her deaths, and later told me not to raise my concerns. Attempts by his executor and me to file complaints and access his medical records, which might confirm or refute noncompliance, proved mostly futile. We only obtained a somewhat redacted copy of his psychiatric evaluation and his medical death certificate. BC's system is a pinball machine of deflections among colleges, police, and coroners, with records protected by privacy law that extends to deceased persons, though this does not seem to apply to the MAID providers who may use them for self-promotion and commercial ventures. If this is already the de facto standard of care for MAID, where mental illness and psychotropics are involved, what will happen if sole mental illness is permitted? In my research, I found evidence the charity, lobbyist, and constitutional litigant Dying with Dignity, or DWD, cares little for safeguards around people's mental health status, historically and now. A large body of archived evidence from DWD sources suggests that it ran a so far unprosecuted scheme of payment-based pro-suicide counseling, assisted suicide, and homicide of adults in the decades up to Carter and C-14, and potentially children. It hosted open access workshops on suicide methods amenable to assistance, homicide, and concealment from investigators. Its public website still describes alternatives for those who are ineligible for MAID, like stopping eating and drinking, refusing treatment, and options in Switzerland. This webpage is accessible to all, including those with mental disorders and children. Last year, Philip Nitschke, inventor of the sarcopod, who gives speeches alongside ChemApp's founders and DWD leaders at the World Federation of Right to Die Societies conferences, claimed in the British press that he provided material support to Kenneth Law. Law just agreed to plead guilty to aiding suicide in 14 deaths after facing first-degree murder charges. Nitschke claims to have met him at a more recent suicide workshop he ran in Toronto. Law's alleged victims were typically teenagers and adults with mental illness. So I find myself forced to ask very uncomfortable questions about what happens in those secret encounters with patients, despite all the MAID laws and safeguards meant to protect them from negligent care and unlawful death.
Thank you, Dr. Lyon. Dr. Maher, 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Thank you for the invitation.
At an Ontario hospital, a medical ethicist, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Ethics in Mental Health, and president of both the Ontario and the global associations of tertiary care ACT teams. They are the teams that take care of the very sickest mentally ill patients. For the last 23 years, I have treated patients that other psychiatrists told me could not get better, and yet they get better. Suffering can always be reduced. With dozens of validated psychotherapy modalities, hundreds of medication combinations, with myriad psychosocial interventions, there is absolutely no such thing as everything has been tried, despite what some patients say, and despite what some psychiatrists who lack skill, knowledge, or perseverance say. Death is being falsely presented as the only option. You seek my evidence because I have particularly relevant experience and knowledge. How do you know who is right when my statements conflict with others? Tragically, ableism and stigmatization are never defeated because of clear logical points made about social fairness. Ideology pays lip service to reason while amplifying misinformation. I presented on this same issue at a Senate hearing in 2021. My rage has since given